Envision you're at this wild froth party tasting on your mixed drink solidly in the pool. Unexpectedly, the water level beginnings. Dropping at first you believe it's some trick, like somebody just opened a channel. However, at that point, for what reason does a genuine whirlpool begin shaping in the pool? It sucks you directly into an opening. Underneath the pool, a long way from those contorted water slides at a water park, and more like torment, you're battling, running exhausted. The water flow hauls you past sharp shakes, blended in with soil, leaving profound injury wounds and injuries breaking bones, and ultimately, you capitulate to the wounds. Might this at any point truly occur? In actuality, totally, that is the means by which Kil Kimi from Israel met his. There's even video film. However, the camera began rolling solely after Kil got sucked into the pool's opening. The recording shows another person nearly falling into similar snare. Heroes found the casualty's body 13 m somewhere down in the pit, framed underneath the pool. As you can see, demise can sneak in the most unexpected places, and a pool isn't even the strangest of them, as consistently watcher prudence is exhorted now. At the point when you hear trap, you most likely don't picture a pool yet. Khalil Kimi's story isn't the main illustration of a pool party turning destructive. On February 28th, in 2020, Russian blogger Yik Rina Dno commended her birthday in an AR to zest things up and make fascinating substance. The visitor chose to dump dry ice into a little pool. You could ask, what's dry ice? It's carbon dioxide cooled until it becomes strong, very much like feathery snow. They compress it to get denser granules. The temperature of this dry ice is near 79°C. It's generally utilized for freezing food. Yet is it okay to toss it in a pool well? This ice is likewise used to make a haze impact innocuous enough. I mean, practically, the video shows everybody having some good times in explore-themed ensembles, assuming the part of researchers on camera anyway. In all probability, none of the visitors truly comprehended science. The thing is, this technique for making haze is protected exclusively in huge outside pools. Now, as you can find in the video, this pool is inside. In addition to, they use an excessive amount of ice, 30 kg in absolute. To be definite, when it hit the water, it quickly transformed into carbon dioxide, uprooting oxygen from the room. Sadly, no one understood that two people euphorically hop into the haze and vanish. The video cuts off on the grounds that unexpectedly everybody around found it hard to relax. Visitors hurried outside to get some air. However, it didn't assist with peopling. Felt so debilitated that they needed to call a rescue vehicle. And what's the most over-the-top frightening section, two visitors who hopped into the pool kicked the bucket on the spot, and the blogger's significant other passed on in the trauma center. You know, at times you can wind up in a snare completely coincidentally. For example, on January 27th, in 2023, Kevin, holding a tech fellow, was simply doing his standard gig in London. His occupation was fixing one of those pop-up public urinals close to Cambridge Carnival in the downtown area. It was a latrine with a extravagant system, bringing down it underground during the day and bringing it up in the city around evening time. Strangely, this latrine's component chose to drop underground right when Kevin was fixing it, catching the unfortunate person. So a void by at latrine lodge can weigh around an incredible 110 kg, and this urinal arrangement was plainly significantly heavier. Many firemen spent multiple and a half hours attempting to liberate him from this snare, yet it was all to no end. Kevin was essentially crunched to death. The dissection showed that the man kicked the bucket from pressure asphyxia, that is the point at which your aviation roots get crushed or confined, prompting an absence of oxygen in your framework. Now, what could be more unnerving than that? Maybe being heated alive back in 1998 in Waller, UK, at the Harenstein. Pastry kitchen designers David Mays and Ian Erickson were simply doing their standard thing, expecting one more common day. Their undertaking was easy. Inside an enormous bread stove, a few sections were misbehaving, and they expected to look at it. To do that, the broiler needed to chill off so laborers could enter and arrive at the wrecked part with a transport for time productivity. However, they immediately cooled it with modern fans. 2 hours in the wake of closing it down, David and Ian were sent into the stove. They moved inside through the base, arriving at the transport. Utilized for batter conveyance to safeguard themselves, they wore ordinary universally handy suits. Just inside did they understand it was excessively hot in there. Ericsson transferred this data to the people outside through a radio, yet out of nowhere, the system began moving so quick that they couldn't climb back out, and in a real sense got heated alive, yet nobody truly knew how to help them, since halting the transport to haul the folks out was unthinkable, conceivable. By then they needed to trust that the transport will go through the whole stove, and that required 17 minutes. The two laborers persevered through temperatures of 100 C. In that trap, clearly Ian and David's surrender to life contrary consumes anyway. The most obviously awful snares you totally can't escape are certainly planes where anything can occur on board. On December 16, 2016, Rayav Syami, an air terminal laborer in Mumbai, was on the runway providing order hands to a plane as it pulled out of the stopping region. The pilots were in a rush, running north of an hour late for their flight. They ignored that 4 ground team individuals were still around the tower. Transporters dispersed, yet unfortunate Submonium, remaining with his back to the plane, didn't understand it was coming right at him. In no time flat, he got sucked into the stream motor, destroying his body. Syami passed on the spot. Still, that is not even the most bizarre air terminal story. On August 10th, 2018, at Seattle-Tacoma Global Air Terminal in Washington, an unusual episode was gotten on reconnaissance cameras. It appeared as though a customary air terminal scene, a plane burdening for departure. What's going on with that? Don't well, anything with the exception of it shouldn't have takeoff in any case. Dispatchers quickly reached the pilot to sort out what was happening. Yet nobody answered. Then they asked who was at the control board. Everything was quiet briefly, when out of nowhere, the pilot spoke. Seattle ground you. Skyline fellow, Umabate. To remove it will be insane. Dispatchers immediately understood the plane had been captured that day. 29-year-old Richard Russell, a ground control specialist at Seattle-Tacoma, began his shift as expected. For the beyond 4 years, he and his group were dependable for stuff and towing planes on the runway. Here's a video of him nonchalantly going through the staff security door, wearing a the cute-off shirt, and luckily nobody gave a lot of consideration to the print. Then he went to the restroom and came out solely after 5 hours, prepared to work. While nobody was looking, Richard slipped into the cockpit of a plane he had quite recently made a difference. Tow dispatchers begged the person to avoid anything silly, since Richard had no flying experience at all. At this point he appeared to be fixated on flying when the plane removed a crisis signal, boomed all through the air terminal, disallowing any remaining planes from removing all with the exception of 2 F-15 contender jets shipped off capture. Richard, he told dispatchers, their endeavors were to no end. He wouldn't set down the plane until he attempted a couple of tricks. Richard, out of nowhere, begun moving the plane, performing circles and moves in any event. Getting exhausted with it, that is the point at which the specialists perceive these moves. They're from the excellent burglary auto game test system. Obviously Richard was a gaming fiend. Obviously those abilities actually weren't sufficient to control a genuine plane. In the meantime, the 2 interceptors attempted to direct him toward the sea. Realizing he was unable to deal with an arrival and the water would be a milder accident, Richard told dispatchers his friends and family would be disheartened when they found out what he'd done. Those were his final words before the plane collided with Ketron Island. He kicked the bucket on the spot. However, you understand what in some cases, even professionals track down it extreme to deal with a plane. This live stream on Facebook on February 15, 2020. 3. Was facilitated by Sanu Jaswar. He was shooting straight forwardly from the plane of Sasquatch Carriers, Flight 6991. Leaving from Kathmandu and shortly headed for Pokhara, Nepal, the traveler was simply catching a pleasant view from the window, ignorant that he would coincidentally record one of the most incredibly shocking misfortunes of the year. Sooner or later, the camera begins shaking fiercely and you can hear individuals shouting off-screen. Soon, there's a brilliant blaze, followed by fire. The video suddenly closes under 2 minutes before the lethal accident. Skipper Andrew Katada had requested the sending of the plane's folds anyway. One of the pilots inadvertently moved the power switch rather than the fold controls. Subsequently, the plane began plunging and crashed upon influence with the ground. This mix-up prompted the demise of each of the 72 individuals on load up, including 2 kids. Still, that is not the most unnerving unforeseen demise. You could look in the air in this video shot. In 2016, you see a blissful person going to skydive. Interestingly, this is Tyler Turner, who was just 18 at the time. Tyler had gentle cerebral paralysis, however, that didn't decrease his pizzazz or prevent him from participating in different sorts of sports. The camera was catching him close to the skydive elder parachute focus, with the individual behind the camera inquiring as to whether Tyler was frightened, to which he answered somewhat unnerving, "I'm when I get up there, it will be like goodness golly, doctor will kick in about." To Tyler was couple hopping with 25-year-old educator Yanggong Kwon. As per Yanggong, he had north of 700 leaps added to his repertoire, so he was altogether reliable. Tyler and Yang hopped from an elevation of right around 4,000 m, and in the urgent second, the educator couldn't convey their parachutes. In the meantime, Tyler's mom was watching from underneath, seeing her child's lethal accident. Yang additionally kicked the bucket in this peculiar episode. Be that as it may, for what reason didn't he respond and open the reinforcement parachutes? It turned out the educator had produced reports guaranteeing he had appropriate certificate. Actually, Yanggong was still waiting on the post-trial process and missing the mark on essential crisis preparing them. Center requested the middle proprietor to pay the family $40 million, being as high as possible. Makes it quite testing to answer rapidly to spontaneous circumstances, so reconsider choosing to skydive or take a ride in a sightseeing balloon. Besides, in Egypt, it cost around 150 am. The lines for this fascination are dependably monstrous, so this English person, Michael Rennie, was feeling really fortunate that he and his significant other scored a ride on a sightseeing balloon alongside Michael. There were 20 travelers and a pilot named Morad Ali. They generally showed up before dawn and asked. They climbed. They got a stunning perspective on the Karnak Sanctuary Complex, the Luxor Sanctuary, and the Valley of the Lords in the entirety of their greatness, with the principal beams of daylight. Everything was fabulous until the arrival at around 9 am. A delightful display was out of now here, obstructed by a massive fire, immersing the inflatable frenzy followed among individuals who failed to see what was occurring and had no idea how to escape. When there was no place to run, as it turned out, there was a gas spill in one of the 4 gas inflatables, causing the fire without a lot thought. Michael and Morat hopped from the consuming inflatable, leaving 2 less individuals on board, which wrecked the equilibrium, making the inflatable shoot up to a level of 300 m. In the interim, Morat and Michael hit the ground, catching fire on the whole, and the fall came about in different breaks. Essentially, they were alive. They lifted their heads just to understand. The rest were presently so high up that hopping wasn't a choice. Individuals they were, in a real sense, consuming a lie. Michael was destroyed at the possibility that his better half was still up there, and at the point when the inflatable began sliding again, they saw a significantly seriously sickening scene. At a level of 30.5 m, 6 individuals chose to bounce from the inflatable, not understanding it was too high. They were attempting to get away from the fire, ignorant there was not possibility of endurance after hitting The ground, every one of them kicked the bucket in a flash, including a pregnant lady. The blazes immediately spread all through the inflatable and arrived at the gas canister, causing a strong blast. The excess individuals on the inflatable passed on the spot after this lamentable occurrence. Expand trips the nation over were briefly suspended, yet not for long these days. You can track down various organizations web-based proposing to see the dawn in Egypt from the flying perspective. Who knows whether they checked their sightseeing balloons any better compared to they supported? Then this multitude of terrible stories, erratic conditions, and the explanations for them simply overwhelm the brain. They must be outperformed by a secretive demise, the reasons for which stay unexplained. Right up till now, this lady's name was Mary Cudy Ann. She resided in Houston Levels alone. In a house with many felines, she didn't have many dear companions or family members, so nobody saw that something odd, even otherworldly, happened to her. In 2015, one day a neighbor saw her window was broken. He looked at the yard and saw the congested grass in the postbox overflowing with letters. Mary, as a perfect maid, wouldn't simply disregard her home like that, so the neighbor called the police to check on the off chance that all was great with her. Yet, when the police went into the house, Mary was mysteriously gone. Concerned her family members, genuinely terrified since no one could accept she would simply leave her felines tragically in her non-attendance. A significant number of them died. Nobody comprehended stood where Mary vanished. The examination delayed, and she was considered missing, so her home was unloaded. As guarantee, the new proprietor took her effects and began leasing the spot anyway. In 2017, the police headquarters got an unusual call. It was the new occupant, his voice shaking as he scarcely expressed that. Inside the house walls, he found a human skeleton. Rodents had intensely glared at it, with indentations even on the glasses. This was genuinely a grisly sight. During the assessment, they coordinated the jawbone, with Mary's photographs affirming it was actually her at this point. How could she end up between those walls, and who caught her there? Mary never caused damage to anybody. However, her family members thought the response could lie in the photographs she cherished taking. In one of them, she reported the development of a huge high-rise close to her, what she called her little palace on the back. Mary expounded on despising the development clamor and feeling uncomfortable seeing her area loaded up with tall structures. She conflicted with the engineer declining to sell her home. Might this at any point be some way or another connected to her demise? Anyway, there's one more hypothesis. A wrecked board was viewed as in the loft, and in the event that you top through the opening at left, you can really see where Mary was bound, so the police figure she could have coincidentally fallen into the space between the walls and later passed on there from starvation. However, at that point, who broke Mary's window? I surmise we won't ever figure out how she fell into that lethal snare. Have you at any point been a stage away from death? Share in the remarks and let us know how you figured out how to escape. Likewise, buy into my feed.